line.
The White House endorsed a bill to make the District of Columbia a state. Residents are already petitioning for the state reptile to be Jeff Sessions.
There we go.
Good one.
Moment, please. Hold on.
Hold.
Okay. 45% of Texan voters said in a poll that they would vote for Matthew McConaughey if he were to run for governor. Those numbers will probably increase since McConaughey plans to run campaign ads all night, all night, all night.
COVID-19 denier Ted Nugent has tested positive for COVID-19. Some may enjoy the irony. Others know he probably thinks he caught it from Biden's Air Force One chemtrail.
More than half of American adults have received at least one vaccine dose. The CDC projects that we'll reach herd immunity as early as the next Kim Kardashian marriage.
And finally, Hester Ford, the oldest living American, has died at the age of 115. See? This is why we shouldn't trust the vaccine, said the guy in tactical gear filming a TikTok in the Walmart parking lot. Welcome to Biden time. We we are here talking about Biden time, as always, and we're hoping our friend Drexel is able to pop in for a little bit. But boy, when you get a text when somebody says they've got their hands full dealing with AT&T, there's a chance that we may never hear from him again because he will be on that phone call for the rest of his life. But
I'm actually surprised he could text with an AT&T phone. So I mean,
he must have like a second, like a work phone, which is like a Verizon or something, you know. So that's why the text was able to go through. In any case, I wanted to talk to both of you and of course our viewers and our friend Storage Yard resident who is always so loyal. Even if he manages to always be so disparaging about our listenership. So we appreciate him being here. And I will tell you, you are not the only one. But even if you were the only one, it would still be worth doing the show because of your loyalty to us. And we appreciate being your number one source for news. Although I do think you probably have us in the number 2 slot after Alex Jones. In any case, I wanted to obviously start with the guilty verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, which it came as a surprise that it was reached so quickly. I was actually going to spend the whole show talking about Demi Lovato and Froyo, but I guess we're going to have to save that for another show because this obviously takes precedence. And I think that I don't know. What have we learned from high-profile trials over the last 25, 30 years is that even when you're like, well, this is clearly a slam dunk and we know how this is going to go, even when there's video evidence, you need look no further than the Rodney King verdict to realize that sometimes it just doesn't go the way you expect it to. I don't usually speak for everyone in the panel, but I'm going to feel like I'm safe to say that we were all relieved and pleased with the verdict. I'll admit I'm always surprised, even when I think about it after the fact. I'm like, well, I shouldn't be. I always manage to find myself surprised. What did you think, Tamra, when you heard that he was found guilty on all 3 counts?
Definitely relieved, and especially that it was on all 3 counts. Because if I were a betting man, I might have put my money on splitting those odds. You know, when the Rodney King beating happened, I was too young to really remember that much about it or grasp the situation. But I heard an analysis recently where they were explaining how when that tape was released, Black communities were like, finally, you can see what we've been talking about. And the fact that those police officers were still not held accountable when it was on film, you know, the level of frustration is understood. And so all of these years later, like basically 3 decades later,
essentially
almost.
30 years later.
Yeah. You know, finally having a little bit of justice, you know, we're just, it's barely, it's not anybody who's saying like, oh, things are changing. It's just like, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've still got a long way to go, but this was definitely a small victory for sure.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Obviously, you know, the way to sort of celebrate it is that it's one, it's about time, it's a step in the right direction, but it is, of course, just one drop in a very big bucket that, you know, hopefully you can see this trend continue in these sort of cases. And, you know, you're talking about the Rodney King video, and somebody that I followed on Twitter they retweeted someone. They wanted to point out it's hard to imagine that we would be able to get this verdict if it had not been for someone who does not get name checked very often. Her name was Darnella Frazier. She was a 17-year-old girl who took out her cell phone and recorded the video that all of us saw. Not 1 year ago when it happened, but it was about a month later when we all started to see it. And you know, I think even that I could understand if, you know, all these people who saw it were like, well, I'm not going to take out my cell phone and film it because I don't want, you know, the police to see me and get angry at me. And, you know, if I've seen what they've done here. So, you know, it's because we have somebody that was able to actually do that. And, you know, I mean, that's the difference between now and the Rodney King verdict, is that we all have, you know, HD movie cameras in our pocket. And so we can capture these things, and hopefully having this kind of evidence helps. Scott, I wanted to get your thoughts when you heard the verdict yesterday.
Well, unlike Tamara, I am a bit of a betting man. But I'm glad I wouldn't have if that was a thing to bet on, because I would have done the same thing. I would not have thought it was going to go 3 for 3. I was very surprised. Happily surprised, but surprised nonetheless. And you brought up the exact point I was going to say, Christian. The fact that, you know, I give so much credit to her at 17 years old, for one thing, to have pulled out her phone to do that, which a lot of people forget is legal to do. The outcome of this case would have been completely different. You would have seen, you know, like their report was basically like the man had medical conditions and died in custody. I mean, if we didn't have that, there's no way that he would have been charged. So it is absolutely incredible. And people do owe a lot to her to have that courage and to have done that at 17. And you're absolutely right. You know, today, everyone has this incredible camera that they carry with them everywhere, which, you know, Rodney King, and even if you go back 15 years ago, we're not even talking that long ago, people didn't have smartphones or anything. So to be able to have this capability does open up and allow for a lot more of a close scrutiny of police practices. And but the sad thing is there's a lot of situations that still occur where there aren't cameras and there aren't evidence and there aren't police cameras and body cams. And so there are a lot of other cases that could potentially be very similar to this that go unpunished or unnoticed because of the fact there isn't a witness or somebody to see that. So this is definitely a good step in the right direction. But yeah.
But even when things are on camera, that's why I brought up the Rodney King beating. Like when something is taped, we've had 3 decades of video proof of something happening, and still no verdicts, nobody being held accountable. And meanwhile, while this was still front and center news over the past year, look at how many shootings still took place, unarmed, you know, shootings and police brutality, while this was still, you know, in the forefront of the news. So that shows, you know, how untouchable most police officers I would feel that this can still go on when there is public scrutiny on them.
No, you're 100% correct. I was just saying in this particular case, if she did not take that footage and there was no evidence, that he would not have been charged. So in this particular case, it worked because she wouldn't have been charged. But you're absolutely right. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot of issues, and that's why we're still discussing what kind of criminal justice reform, what kind of, police reform do we need? And that's why this is still going to be an ongoing challenge for years to come. But absolutely, this is a huge thing, but it's at least one small step in that right direction. But you're 1,000% correct, though. Yes, absolutely.
Right. And, to that point, it was CNN's Jake Tapper actually sent this out yesterday. And this was an article. It was a screen grab. This was from May 26th of last year. And for those watching, you can see. So this is the way that this was covered the week that it happened, the George Floyd. And then look, there's Scott Moore popping up on my screen. You can see that he just retweeted.
I just retweeted.
But, thank you, Scott. S-Man80. Man dies after medical incident during police interaction. And that's before they had the video. So that largely would have been the narrative of this. And it's so without the video, I think that happens. And yes, with videos, we've certainly seen the instances where, there are not guilty verdicts found. There are charges that don't happen. And look, I'll admit that I don't know enough about the case I'm about to reference. And I don't know what the circumstances were. There was an officer involved shooting of a young woman who had a knife, and this could, I don't know if they were being threatened or whatever, but that happened exactly as the verdict was being read. So, obviously, I don't think anyone is saying like, well, great.
Supposedly threatening other teenage girls with the knife.
Right. I've heard that. And I think that, that doesn't sound to me like, I don't think that the two cases are comparable, but, it's that I did hear that yesterday, that the timing that it happened. So, and I think that obviously there'll be an appeal, sentencing. I think the reason that they did the 3 charges is that I think that they all add up to 75 years. And they don't want him to, they don't want him to basically set foot out of prison, I think was the reason they built the case like this. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name, but in the chat, someone points out, unless there's also a reform in the police, this will keep happening. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that, you have the term defund the police is a bit of a lightning rod for people. But I think even people that maybe don't subscribe to that terminology do agree with the idea of reform. And I think that's certainly something that we hope to happen. Tamra, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah. So I attend my neighborhood council meetings, and this week, within the neighborhood council, we always have the captain of the Hollywood precinct join in in the meetings and talk about what's going on in our neighborhood. And they've been floating this idea of sort of a community walkabout where police and stakeholders in the neighborhood will just sort of walk around the streets in order to sort of establish this, I think, sort of a non-threatening presence, and also sort of make some sort of, have a conversation between any residents and police officers, because there has been so much tension over the past year and beyond that, especially. And I really like this idea. But while we're talking about that, and it was a really great, we were having a good conversation. I mentioned how, one of the things in our neighborhood is how these encampments have been spreading out over the entire sidewalk. So you can't even walk down certain streets. And it certainly is a violation of ADA laws, because, if a single person can't walk down the street, it certainly doesn't accommodate a wheelchair or somebody with any sort of mobility issues. So anyway, so I mentioned to the police officer, I was like, this one particular encampment, I said, have we made, because LASA has suggested that people don't approach homeless people to make any sort of requests as far as them moving and stuff like that. Just because you never know the mental state of somebody and stuff like that. Even though we all in our neighborhood, just for the nature of the way things are, we all talk to our homeless neighbors all the time. Or at least I do. Anyway, so I say to the police officer, has there been an effort to, just politely ask, hey, can you guys just scooch? You don't have to leave, just move over a little bit. And his response was that he was like, well, the enforcement of, he used very aggressive language, such as saying like, well, we're not allowed to give them a citation anymore. And, with the enforcement of forcing them to move. And it just occurred to me that like, he was trying to be polite. Like he was, I was saying, can you politely ask? But in police speak, it was his version of that is, I'm enforcing them to using my authority to force them to move. And it just struck me as this systematic, the way that the police structure is set up and that these officers are trained. It seemed to me that there's no to ask for this is not in their vocabulary. It's more like it's my position to force this to happen rather than, request that somebody complies with something. And it's certain conversations like that I say, like it becomes apparent to me that this is what part of what the systematic, the way that police are trained and the way that they are rewarded for certain things, it all comes from such a lens of aggression rather than a lens of cooperation. And so that's, when we talk about defunding the police and systematic change, it's things like that, changing the language, changing the training, changing, things so that they're not, everything's not coming from this angle of aggression and enforcement, but rather an angle of, cooperation and respect.
Right, exactly. And I think that, that sort of speaks to a larger problem. I mean, and, we're seeing today that the day after the verdict, the Department of Justice has launched an inquiry into the Minneapolis police operations because obviously, there are still a lot of questions. I think that, referring earlier to this being the first drop in the bucket in terms of, any kind of change with this kind of treatment. There's also a lot more to be done in terms of the actual George Floyd incident. There, you have the police who stood by. You have any superior officers. There's a lot of questions that continue there. I wanted to just briefly talk about the fact that I think President Biden and Vice President Harris did a great job speaking shortly after the verdict. President Biden making the point, sort of echoing what we're all saying, is that we can't stop here, but that obviously more must be done. So I think that was some positive feedback. Unfortunately, I think Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi spoke a little more off the cuff than she should have when she was speaking with the CBC, the Canadian broadcaster. She said, "Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice. Because of you and because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous for justice." I think that that's one of those instances of a well-intentioned sentiment, but old Nancy probably has quite a few people who can prepare statements like that for her, and they don't come off like that. And, she was speaking during an interview, but I still think that she's been at this long enough, and that sort of thing does not really help. Scott, had you heard Pelosi's comments and your thoughts on maybe what she was trying to say, if you want to look at it that way, or that the actual comments don't necessarily help the narrative?
No, I agree. I didn't hear them personally, but I heard about them, and obviously that wasn't her intention. And I've even said this about Republicans, and I mean Trump is a whole other animal. But the thing is, and it kind of goes back to what we talk about even with Kamala Harris going to the border. It's like sometimes we get overly caught up in the syntax of what people are saying when it still, to me, wasn't that bad, but I understood what she meant, and that was the point. And I think as a society, we look for everything to parse and break out, oh, somebody said it this way and everything else. Yeah, she could have said it a lot better, and there were definitely issues with that. But her point was the fact that he's not dying in vain now, that this now is something that can be looked back on, like this now is the first step in getting that criminal justice reform, and that his death didn't just happen and like previous ones, and gets, this is something that's going to be synonymous with that first step in criminal justice reform. So yeah, that's what she meant, but obviously it didn't come out quite right.
And yeah, and I think that just I mean, she's just can, in terms of the power she holds, and the fact that she's third in line for the presidency. You definitely want somebody that it's almost like you would rather get some kind of marble mouthed uncertain sort of nonsense non-statement than her trying to say this. Do you have any thoughts on the way Speaker Pelosi responded in those comments that I read a moment ago, Tamra?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Scott that we we have a problem with over scrutinizing syntax, because every single statement that anybody says is immediately available to us, at all times. And there are things that, Trump said that, I mean, obviously there are horrific things that he said, but there are also things that he said that, pundits like myself blew up out of context for fun because we don't like this man, and it was probably just a matter of syntax. That's why so many Republicans would constantly be saying, that's not what he meant. That's not what he meant. And most of the time, it was like, you know what he meant. But there were, it's so easy to attack somebody that you politically don't agree with, for just making some sort of like a misstep. A lot of, but just hope that hoping that it's not a big enough misstep that they're actually saying something, that can't be walked back. But yeah, right. This wasn't great, but it certainly wasn't bad enough that it can't be walked back.
Well, speaking of the previous administration, something that I admit that I did not remember, which was brought to my attention, was that last year, Derek Chauvin agreed to plead guilty to third-degree murder days after George Floyd's death, and then Attorney General William Barr rejected the deal. And I think that, that sort of lends itself to just imagine if the election had gone the other way, and this verdict, just sort of what they were looking for, like why the, why Barr got involved, I mean, why the AG actually says like, oh, no, we can't have that, and, it could be because he shouldn't be able to plead to the third-degree murder charge, perhaps. But I don't know. It's just interesting, tidbit there that was brought to my attention. One other long-tenured member of the House that I wanted to speak about for a moment is Maxine Waters, who a little bit earlier today was the move to possibly censure her was tabled, as they say, 216 to 210. Very strict party line votes, as I think is becoming the norm over there. And I mean, I think that all the Republicans voted to have this conversation to censure her, and all the Democrats voted not to. And this was, excuse me, based on comments that she made earlier in the week that people should not stand for a guilty verdict, and that people should head out on the streets, and basically saying that they should protest. And
she said they should be more confrontational, right?
Yes, right, exactly. They should be more confrontational, and I think that that's the part that leads to trouble, because I think if it was just peacefully speak your mind, that's one thing. But yeah, the idea that you should be more confrontational, again, it's that is some. I think that what Speaker Pelosi did was a little bit more, just ill-timed, off the cuff turn of phrase. I think that what Maxine Waters said was very calculated, and I think could obviously have created some problems for her if the makeup of the House was a little bit different. If if a few Dems had been caught in a snowstorm or something, that this could have gone forward. What do you think about those comments and sort of the reaction to them by the right, Tamra?
Ooh, it's hard to say because I am a fan of Maxine Waters, and so I am in that position of being like, well, she's not inciting violence. She's but then that's it's hard to try to defend that. I will say that should she not have said anything? I don't know. I feel like, knowing Maxine Waters and the type of statements she usually makes, this is par for the course. It's certainly no surprise. And I don't know if it should have been, there's certainly countless examples of, when we've had these conversations, when Republican Congress people have maybe made a tweet with like image of a gun or something like that, and those type of things sort of threaten violence, or maybe even more subtle suggestions of violence too. So it's hard to defend any suggestion of aggression, confrontation, anything like that. So should she have been disciplined or anything like that? I don't think so. But
but also
not going to defend what she said either, I guess.
Right, you're not defending what she said, and I would say that we've seen that a censure really is just sort of a slap on the wrist. So this isn't like she was going to lose her seat or anything, but it's also just like, no, let's just not take our time with this. Scott, I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. I'm like, look, Maxine Waters is incredibly passionate. And she's definitely said things in the past, especially during the Trump era, that people could look at and be like, ooh, but let's be honest, if she was censored, which is the Republicans' favorite thing to do these days, they do it to their own who don't have enough fealty to their God Trump. It means nothing, and she could be there forever, and her district, it's never going to change. So it's just more political theater. And it's more for Republicans that like to be hypocritical, to pretend like this is a big deal. But yeah, I agree with Tamra. I think she should have just stayed quiet. There was no reason until after the verdict, but even then, you could get people riled up, and if the verdict went a different direction, it could have helped, light the fires to protest. So it's part of her thing is being passionate and saying things that definitely are on the verge of being inappropriate. But even if she was censored, it means really nothing, and it's not going to suddenly change her behavior. Now she's all of a sudden going to be quiet and demure, because that's not her personality, and that's not who she is.
She is confrontational.
She is confrontational. That's who she is, and she's not changing for anyone at this point, and nor would she care. If she was censored, she'd probably wear that as a badge of honor, which I'm sure a lot of the Republicans that have been censored from their own fellow Republicans for not, being enough of a bootlicker to Trump would feel the same way. So it really was just silly political theater, and it's time that the Republicans actually got down to working the business of the people instead of focusing on things like that. So, but yeah, she should have, like Tamara said, she shouldn't have said anything but that's just not her.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that this is not the moment in her career where she's going to start acting differently. And, Storage Yard resident wants to know how anybody can be a fan of Maxine Waters. But I think that, it just depends. It's like you root for the people on your own team, and there are certainly people that that the right are fans of. Look, even Matt Getz has his supporters still at this point.
Because
Mostly because he buys them alcohol at the 7-Eleven, but that's neither here nor there. What were you going to say, Tamara?
Yeah, but they're not old enough to vote yet. That's the problem.
That's the problem. It's true.
The ones that are still fanciers can't vote.
Maxine Waters has been in Congress for, I don't know if I can
100 years.
For forever. She has been in Congress forever.
Yeah.
She has gotten the spotlight in the past 4 or 5 years, So I think what I'm pointing out is that, she's always been how she is, as outspoken and as blunt as she is. She'll say things to reporters like, "What do you want?" And it's sort of that Auntie Maxine don't care thing. That's why people are drawn to her, the same way that Trump supporters were drawn to him, the ones who said because he tells it like it is, or whatever that they would claim. So that is why, but the fact that she's only gotten the spotlight this late in her career just sort of shows the shifting of the, people who previously did not have a voice suddenly do, somewhat.
Right. And to your point, Maxine Waters has represented the 43rd Congressional District here in California since 1991, so 30 years. And that's, I think that you're definitely going to get fairly set in your ways at that point. And, we mentioned this sort of in passing last week, and I'll announce officially that our show next week will be on Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, because President Biden is going to give a non-State of the Union speech where he will essentially give the State of the Union, but it is not that speech, but he will speak to a joint session of Congress. And I think that, we talked a little bit about this last week. And I don't know if, Scott, you still feel as though you could probably predict what he's going to talk about and what he's going to cover. And you can probably also, if you needed to, script out what criticisms the 210 Congress people that we just referenced who do everything on their party lines would have to say. But is there any concern about something that you're worried that he might not put in there, something important that maybe not enough focus is being on at this point?
No, because I think, one of the things they're going to bring up again are like they came out and talked about the criminal justice issues last night. I think that's definitely going to be more forefront in the speech now, especially in light of how the case went yesterday. But I think the really cool thing is going to be able to see for the first time in our history 2 women there behind him, which will be very cool. Just knowing that here you have a woman vice president and a woman speaker of the House, which is clearly never happened before to have both at the same time, which is going to be really a cool kind of optics. But he's disciplined now and knowing what they need to do and not need to do. I mean, as we've seen, his approval ratings in some polls are north of 60% right now. So they're being disciplined, and I know that they're going to be disciplined in what they need to do with the speech, because this is going to be his really first. We talked about his first press conference was delayed, and this was actually delayed too. Usually, a new president still does this type of speech, end of February, generally. So we're about 2 months later than we normally would hear from a new president in this situation. But obviously, with COVID and other things going on, I think they had pushed it. So I think they're going to be really on the points he's going to make and try to do it in a sort of a humble brag way to say, hey, look, we're turning the corner. Trump loved to talk about how great the stock market was under his watch. Well, it's been higher now than it ever was under Trump. So, you could say the economy's coming back. You can say the stock market's coming back. You can say We have made so much progress in getting the vaccines out that they're open to everybody now ahead of schedule. As we talked about in the past, this was a good strategy on their part to kind of, undersay that, like, hey, we'll underperform here, but knowing they could overperform when it came out to getting the vaccine rollout. So they looked a lot better and organized. So they have a lot of wins to be able to say. They're going to bring up, this infrastructure plan, and I think he's going to do a really good job being able to explain why this is vitally important and why Republicans should sign on to this as well, because it, again, helps commerce. It helps companies when you have current, infrastructure. And I think that's going to be something that he's definitely going to bring up, because he knows that his window is closing once we get to the fall, because then we're already focused on the 2022 midterm elections. So this is the time to go big. And I think they're going to make sure that they cover all those points and make sure that it comes across as positive as it can be for the American people.
Right. No, I think that, look, anytime that anybody does this, there's a certain degree of cheerleading and chest pounding and all of that. And I think deservedly so for a lot of what's happened, as opposed to a year ago right now. Tamara, one of the, there's sort of I don't even want to call it a movement. There's been discussion that, this would be a great time to steer our focus towards climate change, because of the fact that, you're able to kind of point to the time before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And now that we're sort of coming out of it slowly but surely to some extent, you're able to kind of see the impact of, carbon
less
emissions
driving
and all that.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, certainly less driving. So I think that, that has become a very partisan issue. I don't know, at least during all of Maxine Waters' tenure, at least for the last 30 years, anything to do with the climate. Do you think that this is an opportunity to really sort of hammer that home, how important that is for this administration, when I think we know where the previous administration stood on this?
Yes, in the words of Greta Thunberg, I want you to panic. Yes, this is a crisis. And the more that we can do as soon as possible, the better. I know AOC is, what did they tweak the Green New Deal or presenting it again? It's coming up again, and that,
I believe it's the Green Newer Deal now.
Yeah, the Green Newer Deal.
Yeah.
So I mean, it feels like crisis isn't even a strong enough word. We are in immediate need of sweeping changes. And anybody who is still denying that climate change is happening, I feel sorry for them, because they are seeing, like we're seeing with our own eyes, summers are getting hotter, fires are burning longer, hurricanes are more destructive than ever. I mean, if you believe that climate change has not happened, you are looking at a circle and insisting it's a square, because you must, understand the severity of it and insist that this, I'm choosing to believe that this isn't happening because of, how tragic it is. So the most that we can do immediately, I think Biden needs to utilize, the Democrats need to utilize our numbers right now to really put the hammer down on sweeping climate change initiatives.
Yeah, no, I think that I think that it is a very political issue, and it's a very divisive issue. But even with the slimmest of majorities, I think is a time to really focus on it. And I think that you're able to make your case better.
Especially since it's one of those issues where the majority of Americans, when it comes to polling, climate change is something that the majority of people are grasping the severity of it. So it would be another thing that for Biden to tackle would be, hugely popular.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to a comment from our friend Storage Yard Resident. This is something that we've talked a lot about on the show. He's using Maxine Waters as an example. Another reason why term limits are needed. I absolutely think, regardless of someone's abilities and the letter in the parentheses next to their name, 30 years is a very long time. And
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know what it is, but I think you should certainly have them. I think there should certainly be term limits, and it would be great to have just sort of a consistent one for House and Senate. But I know that the term lengths are different, so it's like how many terms? I think 2 terms seems good, but 8 years for president. I don't think a president needs 12 years. So. If you want to give somebody in one of the lower chambers, you want to give them 12 years. I'm like, that doesn't sound crazy, yeah. And I'm not singling out Maxine Waters per se, but you don't ever want people to get rich by being, in public service for their life. It should not become your career. It should just sort of, you should be serving. But again, it's not so much about her. She just is who we're talking about.
I think in general, when you look at Mitch McConnell, who's also been there for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And this goes beyond. I think the Supreme Court should be the same thing, because we're going back in a time when this stuff was crafted, where people were not living as long. And now we have people that are consistently in their 70s, 80s, even approaching 90, that are still there. And again, there's nothing wrong with that if they run later in life and they win, and people and their voters want to vote for them. That's one thing. But when you're now, like you said, making this a lifelong career and you've been there 30, 40 plus
Dianne
years.
Feinstein is the oldest senator ever, or
no, not the oldest ever.
Not ever.
The oldest at the moment. At the moment right now.
Because I believe Strom Thurmond was 167.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yes, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Robert Byrd in West Virginia was in his 90s when he was still there, and has since passed away and everything, obviously, but this was years ago. And we've had quite a few others, and Chuck Grassley in Iowa is right up there too. He's in his late 80s.
But to your point, if you're in the House for 12 years and then you run for the Senate for 12 years or whatever, I'm like, okay, fine. Go, and then you want to run for president too. That's fine. And it is something that
we're just saying, start your Senate bid when you're 75. That's when you should enter politics.
You should be running for president when you're Jimmy Carter's age.
Yes, when you're going to be 96 and who's still alive. Walter Mondale just passed away.
That was the first thing I thought when I heard that that poor Walter Mondale passed away. Was that Jimmy Carter? Yeah, Jimmy Carter. You know why Jimmy Carter's one of the reasons Jimmy Carter's still alive? Because he didn't go to Washington in January to sit outside for the inauguration. He's like, no, you guys have fun. I'll watch it on TV, So the final thing I wanted to talk about is it's come up a few times. It was a campaign issue. President Biden, I believe he signed this. Tell me if I'm wrong. But he was planning to sign an executive order that was going to create this presidential commission on the Supreme Court. And if he didn't, I missed it if he signed it, basically. But I mean, this is going to study, term limits for the Supreme Court, which Scott, you just referenced, but also this idea of adding more justices. And I think that this is definitely one of those ones that, you probably look at it on down partisan lines. It's like if you feel like there are too many conservative justices after Trump's 3 appointments, then you think that it's probably a great idea. But also, if, I don't know, in 16 years, the next time that there's a Republican president, you don't want them to also be able to do it. And, when at some point where you've got 20 justices or whatever. But this, I think that taking the step, having the commission is sort of it's kind of like the very condescending way of we're going to do this, but let me get the advice from people who are going to tell me we should do this. And we've talked about this before, but since the term limits came up, I wanted to kind of reference both of those issues. Tamra, your thoughts on term limits for the Supreme Court, and then also expanding the court to some reasonable number, but hopefully not the 20 that I just referenced.
Yeah, again, I don't know what the executive order specifically stated, because I guess if we're to expand the Supreme Court, is there an eventual cap on that? I don't know. I definitely think term limits are in order, and I definitely think some reform of something is definitely in order. But as to the specifics of what it should be, I wish I knew more on the subject.
Yeah, but it's just more of a feeling, and I don't know. I feel like most people would probably feel, I don't think that anybody who's watched this show, Tamara, thinks that you were you were a Trumper. So I think that you feeling that, oh yeah, if Biden adds a few more people to the Supreme Court, that's going to be a good thing. That wouldn't shock anybody. I think. I think that, look, I think that it will at least all be able to have a more informed opinion after that. I don't know. That's where I feel on that. And Scott, I know you sort of spoke about it in passing in terms of the term limits, but when it comes to the adding the Supreme Court, are you hesitant about it for the same reason that I am, which is that, future presidents that maybe you don't like as much are going to do the same thing?
Yeah, I think it just opens the door to just crazy zoo. Then what's going to change? Like you said, we add 13 here, and then a Republican with a Republican-led Senate adds another 5, and next thing you know, we've got 100 Supreme Court justices like the Senate. And it just gets out of control. Now, I agree. I understand where they came up with a number with 13 because of the district, courts, the federal courts that have expanded over time. And that's their original reasoning behind where that number came from, beyond the fact, and obviously, again, that's more Democrats saying that, but that's where that number came from, is to equal out the number of federal jurisdictions there are and appellate courts there are in the country that have expanded over time, as opposed to the number of justices, which have remained the same since 1869. But I do agree it's a slippery slope on either side. I think term limits are a lot of a fairer, more equitable way of handling it. The issue that comes up, though, is that, constitutional? Does that require a constitutional amendment, which, of course, would be hugely challenging to do, because all it says is basically in the Constitution, like a judge in good behavior. Which is very vague and very general. And again, the problem was when these things were crafted, people's life was so much shorter. And now you get someone on the court that's there for potentially 50 years when you get someone like Amy Coney Barrett that's in her 40s. I mean, ostensibly, right, when health continues to improve, you could have someone on the court well into their 90s. So it is I think it's gotten out of control, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. It started with Harry Reid, that opened the door to allow some of the judges to be appointed with just a simple majority. And then Mitch McConnell, of course, takes it to an extreme step. And he played this game to a point that he made this very dangerous. And I do blame him and the Republicans for that, to be where we are today, because the hypocrisy behind not allowing Obama to appoint someone in the winter of 2016, but then cramming through somebody a week before the election when people were already voting, was the height of hypocrisy, and has made this into a very dangerous one-upsman's, and the stakes way too high, and it should not be that way. So the easy solution is, yes, add term limits, have them overlap, give each president an opportunity to be able to select 2 a term, and you've already allowed more of an equitable, and you lower the temperature and you lower the politicizing of this, because the court shouldn't be anyways. And we've seen time and time again, too, a lot of times Republicans and Democrats will pick someone they think is going to be in their wheelhouse, but ends up going in a different direction over time as they start to hear cases and they move forward. So I agree that there has to be change. And yes, the commission is going to be happening. And I believe it's got 36 members. So it's a pretty, big group. And they will be looking at all these things, and they will be able to see, does it require a constitutional amendment if you were to do term limits? But I'm on board with term limits just across the board, Senate, House, and I think the Supreme Court, because 18 years is more than enough to have someone on the high court at this point. So
I agree. And you have people you have people who stay on the court longer than they should have against their own health recommendations, obviously for political appointment reasons. So,
and that's the problem is you stay on way over when you should, because it's a lifelong appointment. And if there's a person from the opposition party who appointed you, then you feel that you need to stay on longer, and it just sets up a really bad situation for everybody. So they definitely need to figure out a solution on that for sure.
Yeah. And then one final thing, just as I was putting together, some of these thoughts on the Supreme Court, I found out that back on Monday, the Supreme Court said that they would not take up a case from several Republicans in Pennsylvania who were challenging changes to the election rules. Yes, former President Trump is still losing cases. Republicans are still losing cases, still trying to litigate the 2020 election. So I think that will probably continue until the 2024 election. But I guess it's neither rain nor sleet nor snow will keep some Republicans from challenging the outcome of the 2020 election.
Sore losers. It's pathetic. It really is. It's embarrassing for the country to have people act so foolish. They lost, and they lost handily, and it's happened in the past.
Well,
with one-term presidents, it'll happen again.
Well, and especially just the amount of people who, the amount of elected officials who certainly felt that the lower part of the ballot that led to their reelection was accurate, but there was fraud at the top of all of these same ballots that when it went to president. But anyway, always, so that seems like that's not going anywhere. But we'll be going to Thursday just for next week, as we referenced earlier, because President Biden will be speaking on Wednesday. So we will be with you Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we extend our deepest sympathies to our friend Drexel, who has been on with customer support this entire time and told me he would not be able to join us. He is trying to work out the connection there at the office, but hopefully we just have him on sometime soon, because it's been a while. I don't think we've talked to him since Inauguration Day. But until next Thursday, Tamra, where can people find you?
Hey, Tamra.
Just
on
everywhere.
Social media, except on Twitter. Add an underscore.
Oh yeah, just put that underscore in there. And Scott Moore, where can people find you?
Well, we saw the brief retweet there. SMan80 on Twitter. That's SMAN80.
And you'll be able to find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And the Bladtcast YouTube channel will feature shows. It'll feature this show, our Marvel movie talk show, the Bladtcast. Lots of just individual interviews pop up there, and musicians and authors and things. So please subscribe if you're so inclined. Thank you to everybody who was in the live chat. And we always appreciate the interaction. We will see everybody next Thursday, but have a good one until then, everybody. Bye-bye.